They say you can't out-train a bad diet, but is that actually true? The answer is sadly kinda, yeah. But the question is why? I mean, if exercise is supposed to burn calories, and burning calories is supposed to help with fat loss, then why wouldn't it? That is the question that I'm gonna answer in this video, and I'm also gonna show you what you can do to make exercise work for you, and tell you what I learned after experimenting on myself and learning this lesson the long and very hard way. So, if you wanna learn how to lose weight and don't want to waste your time doing stuff that won't really move the needle, then keep watching. By the end of this video, you will know exactly what you should be doing and what me and my clients do instead. So like I said, this is a lesson that I had to learn the hard way. It was around the time of a certain global pandemic a few years back. I got trapped in solitary confinement inside my house. I was living alone and I was losing my mind with boredom. So for something to do, I got on my bike. I strapped on a heart rate monitor. I went for a long ride. And to keep up with the extra calorie burn, when I got home, I had myself a bowl of ice cream, and that was that. The next day, I decided to do it again. And because I'm also a little bit of a psycho, I kept doing it every day, except every time I rode a little bit further and I also ate a little bit more ice cream. And I kept doing that every day until I was riding about 40 kilometers a day and I was coming home and eating almost a full tub of ice cream to equal it all out. But the problem was I started getting fat. And being a dumbass and a foodie, instead of just eating less ice cream, I started riding more to try and out-train it. And it didn't work, and I ended up just getting fatter. And eventually I got things back in check, but it took way more adjusting than it should have. By the time I got my weight back in check, I was still doing 20 kilometers a day of riding when I was doing none before, but I was back to almost the exact same calories as when I started. And look, granted, this is an extreme case. You are probably not as much of a maniac and probably not as dumb as me. You're probably not planning on riding a rusty bike 40 kilometers a day and then knocking back a tub of ice cream. But we know that it's supposed to be calories in and calories out, and that's how it works. If I'm burning 1,200 calories on a bike and I'm only eating back 1,100 calories of Ben & Jerry's, then how am I getting fat? If anything, I should be slowly losing weight. So it made me dig into it. And what I found was really, really interesting. Let me explain what actually happens here. You want to imagine for a second that you're living your life, you're doing your thing, carefree, no worries, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you get hit by this massive bill you weren't expecting. And we're talking, it clears out almost half your bank account. And unless you want to be on the bones of your ass by the time your next paycheck comes in, you need to do some serious rearranging, right? So you do an emergency rebudget, you start making cutbacks and switching things up, getting a little bit thrifty to make sure that your money lasts so that you can get back to being under control. Because if you don't, you're going to run out of cash. Things are going to get pretty hairy for you. Well, that right there is pretty much bang on how your metabolism responds to exercise. It does the very same emergency adjusting, and it's why, even when it's supposed to work, it is such a bad idea to try and exercise your way into fat loss. To put it plainly, your body's trying to sabotage you, kind of. And on the surface, it doesn't really make sense. I mean, why is your body fighting against you, especially when you're trying to lose weight? And that's supposed to be good for you. But the question that I would counter with is, why wouldn't it? I mean, think, if you didn't rebalance your accounting and the way that you spend after that big bill came out, you would definitely run out of money, and that would be a problem. And when you rearrange your bank accounts to make sure that you don't go broke, you're not sitting there going, oh, why am I sabotaging myself having a good time? It makes perfect sense that you're doing it because you don't want to go broke. Any time that your body is sabotaging your weight loss, more likely what it's trying to do is to secure your survival. If you zoom out, you've had a really, really long time of eating a pretty consistent band of calories and having a pretty consistent band going back out. So when you go and smash through a huge pile of energy at once in a big training session, your body deals with that based on the norm it knows. And if it thinks that the same amount of energy as usual is coming in, then it thinks you're going to go calorie broke thanks to this huge bill of exercise, and it's going to adjust to try and protect you. It thinks It thinks that it's helping. It spots a gap between how much energy it's got to spare and how much it anticipates is coming in, and it's going to try and close that gap. Let's say that this is you, that you eat usually 3,000 calories a day, and that 3,000 is broken up into a few things: your basic body functions, processing the food that you eat, your general moving, and your exercise. And that's sort of what makes up your energy pie. When you add in a big dose of exercise, what you expect to happen is this. You think that the whole pie grows because you've just juiced up the exercise slice with a big cardio session and burned 1,000 calories on a bike or something. Essentially, we're anticipating exercise climbs and our total burn increases linearly. The exercise does climb. You're not burning calories, but everything else shrinks to compensate for the burn that we weren't expecting. And now we can see why eating a 1-for-1 replacement of calories in the form of Ben & Jerry's was a bad idea. Because now we know that we are absolutely going to see a drop-off of some size in what we burn versus what we're expecting. But the question is, how big, right? How do you know how hard things are going to drop if you do exercise? How are you meant to figure that out? And more than that, is there anything that actually is worth doing? Well, first, the good news is yes, there is one thing that is a trump card to play. It's almost completely immune to this adjustment that we see, and it's what I personally use and what I get all my clients to do as well. But as far as figuring out which pie you might end up with goes, there are 3 main variables you want to consider, and they are leanness, frequency, and intensity. The leaner that you are, the harder that you train, and how often you do that training all have a huge impact on which pie you end up with. Now, I was quite lean when I was riding the bike, which is why I was trying to eat the calories back in an easy way in ice cream. But if you're lean and you're riding hard and you're doing it every single day, that is the trifecta for getting smashed. And that can look as bad as losing up to 60% of the calories that you actually burn. If you're at a normal sort of level of body fat and you're doing reasonable amounts of activity, you're probably going to sit somewhere in this 20 to 40% range. But like I said, there is one thing that you can do that for pretty much anyone will have as close to zero a constraint effect as we can possibly manage, and that appears to be pretty much unaffected by how much of it you do, and that is walking. You can expect to hang on to 90% of the calories that you actually burn when you walk, which is as close to a 1-to-1 ratio of calories burned to Ben & Jerry's eaten that we can possibly ask for. That you can't try and cheat the system by walking at a supersonic speed or at a crazy incline or something like that, or you're not really walking anymore, are you? Beyond that, you can do just about as much of it as you want to do. You can do it without fatiguing the pants off yourself. You can do it without losing a bunch of calories to this constraint effect. And if you can find a way to just bake it into your daily life, like walking after your meals or like getting yourself a walking pad, then you'll have it made. But as far as other forms of training go, I am not saying that exercise is worthless, just not as a fat loss tool. It still sucks for fat loss. So my advice is pretty simple. If it makes you fitter or happier or healthier, then have at it. Just, make sure you don't go eating 100% of it back in ice cream. But if you're just doing it to burn calories, I wouldn't bother. It is a bad trade and you're better off walking. Or if you want the most reliable way that I have found to lose weight every single week, week over week, like clockwork, the best way and the way that I recommend is actually something completely different. And I cover how to do it in this video. So watch this one next and I'll show you how to make it happen.